Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on the ETHDenver stage and talking about chain abstraction. Before we begin, I will request a quick round of introduction from Vivek and Brendan here. Anyone can go first. Brendan, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Brendan O'Toole. I'm a senior product manager at Agoric. Bit of background on Agoric. Agoric is building orchestration capabilities that enables developers to create user-friendly apps that allow the seamless movement of assets and services across chain.
Hi, first of all, it's great to be here in among some of the brightest minds in the Web3 space and ecosystem here. My name is Vivek. I am the CTO of Okto. Okto is a end-to-end chain abstraction solution where we are basically building a SDK using which developers can express their intent that will be orchestrated across the chain using multiple layers and components. The main intent here being to simplify the usability and the experience for the app developers and user experiences for end users as well.
That's amazing. So that brings me to my first question. Like right now, Web3 seems very fragmented. We have multiple chains, multiple protocols. There are different consensus mechanisms. Everything seems so clunky. So what's your opinion on that? Vivek, Brendan, you are going to first?
Yeah. So it's already obvious at this stage that fragmentation is a big problem in the industry. I think what's interesting about fragmentation is it's allowed innovative solutions to run in parallel because people have had to figure out how to coexist. But I think the real challenge is not the fragmentation itself. It's been the lack of connective tissue that has bridged these ecosystems together to act as conduits for that liquidity. So, there's such a huge addressable market out there if we can all bring it all together. And that's what we're trying to do with orchestration. We're trying to bring these players together. We're trying to abstract away the complexities to enable this amazing, desirable endgame of this UX. And these are the real problems that we're focusing on.
That's amazing. Vivek, your opinion?
Right, I think it's a very good question because the fragmentation in the Web3 ecosystem today is real. I mean, there is a whole selection of networks, protocols, liquidity solutions that are spread across with their own set of complications that make it very difficult for a developer to build on them. Right? Because a developer has to worry about how am I going to orchestrate my transaction across multiple ecosystems, how am I going to orchestrate my transaction across different chains, what if the user has liquidity spread across multiple networks, how am I going to aggregate that liquidity and then execute the transaction. And the reality is that's not what the developers or the end users eventually want. Right? So if you ask an end user, what do they want? They want their intent to be solved. Right? So for example, if I have an intent to invest in a perp protocol, then I should be able to invest in the perp protocol without having to worry about what the network is, what the protocol is, where my liquidity lies. And the same applies to an app developer. An app developer should be able to develop a dApp without having to worry about which network am I actually executing this transaction on, how am I going to execute this transaction on, etc. So the real question here is, how are we going to achieve that? Right? For example, how Brendan mentioned about creating this connective tissue in this fragmented ecosystem. I believe that it is a matter of creating this solution at 4 different levels. I mean, first of all, you need to solve for coordination. Then you need to solve for execution. Then you need to solve for data and liquidity. And then finally, settlement or finality on chain. Right? So take the example, right? So take an example of the perp example that I was saying. So for example, if I'm an end user and I wanted to make an investment in a perp protocol, where my assets are actually lying on 3 different chains in 3 different ecosystems. So some of it is lying on Solana, some of it is lying on Aptos, and some of it is actually lying in, say, Ethereum, right? How am I going to then be able to execute this transaction, say, on a Hyper-VM, right, or Hyper-EVM, right? So what you need to do, you need to first of all find out what is the best way for me to aggregate this liquidity. Then you need to be able to execute these steps and aggregate that liquidity. And then finally, be able to execute that transaction on the target network and then do the final settlement. And so if you are able to do all of these steps and execute this transaction across all of these steps in a single click of a button, or a single expression of intent from a developer, then that is the unified ecosystem, or that is the unified blockchain world that every developer or every user is actually looking for. So I think fragmentation is real, but the end state here would be where everything is unified and automated.
That's amazing explanation. That brings me to a question specifically for Vivek. What is exactly the chain abstraction solution Okto is building? We are talking about the complete stack. Can you put some light on it?
Sure. So see, Okto, like I said, we are building an end-to-end chain abstraction solution. The start of which is basically an interoperable wallet that we are building. An interoperable wallet that gives you delegated access to execute transactions across any of the chains and any of the networks that we support. At this moment, we support more than 30 networks, and we are expanding as we go along. Now, if I were to go back to the 4 layers that we were talking about, right? So how are you going to do coordination? How are you going to do the execution? How are you going to do? And in Okto, we have actually built out a solution for each one of these 4 layers, and made it so simple that a developer is able to just express their intent and is able to execute. Right? For example, we have built out a solution called as unified liquidity layer. What this unified liquidity layer does is that it actually aggregates liquidity transparently without the user having to worry about where their assets are lying. We find the best ways to do it. We find the most cost-efficient ways to do it, the fastest ways to do it, and then aggregate that liquidity for the user. Similarly, we are also building out a solution called as DWN. DWN is what we call as decentralized wallet network. Decentralized wallet network is, I believe, one of the world's first fully decentralized wallet network that is actually driven on top of AVS operators, where the user is actually able to express an intent, get the signing done, and the signing transaction can then be executed across multiple chains. Then we back it off with what we call as internally decentralized transaction network, which actually finds these paths and executes the transactions across multiple networks. So in summary, if you were to go back to the original framework that we were talking about, coordination, execution, data and liquidity, and then settlement, we are actually operating our solution across all of those things. And that's why we say it's total abstraction, or we say it's an end-to-end abstraction solution, where a user is able to express their intent with just one single expression of intent, and everything else on the blockchain is taken care of by a platform.
That's amazing
Can I
explanation.
chime in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, it's worth distinguishing that what you guys are doing with Okto, you have this, it's a lot bigger ecosystem that you're trying to abstract. You're trying to abstract kind of the whole, everything in between. The way Agoric is approaching it is different. And again, this speaks to how there's a lot of people trying to solve this problem in the space. No, it's not a monopoly, it's a market. People are doing it in different ways. They're going to do it in ways that complement each other. There may be ways that Agoric and Okto work together to overlap and increase the surface area of this orchestration fabric. But the way Agoric looks at it is, we're a smart contracting platform in hardened JavaScript, but we look at it our orchestration smart contracts are these programmable smarts that can automate this cross-chain, multi-chain function. And so the nature of our smart contracts are, you can do things that you can't do anywhere else. You can code timers. You can have actions take place in future when a certain date is met. You can have transactions happen over multiple blocks. You can have things preset to trigger under certain events. And so you program the smart contract. It has all these features that allows the user, the builder, to code in this amazing experience from start to finish, and so it puts more of the power in the builders' hands, because the builders are ultimately the decision makers. They need to choose orchestration tools to provide that exceptional UX, and so when they do that, they have to. What they pick is important, because it might not be a one-shot solution. They have to do it a few different ways. Yeah, I just want to kind of add the context of how Agoric is a little bit different, Okto.
Right. So, and I think I agree in that Agoric is doing, I think, beautiful work, especially on the execution layer of the overall framework that we were talking about. In the way that we are actually trying to build the DTN network is pretty much in the conceptual thought of the way we were actually talking about, in that we eventually plan to have a whole a network of solvers, and then for the users to be able to express their preferences of who actually the solver would be and how the solving actually would be done. So while in the first layer that we have actually built out, we will probably be one of the only solvers in the network, but eventually the solution is actually built out, and that's the reason why we actually call it decentralized, in that we are going to have a whole network of solvers and then be able to find the most optimized way to solve it across multiple solvers.
That's amazing explanation. But whatever the point you said, Brandon, like that brings me to a conclusion that more than smart contracts, we need smart coordination inside the blockchains. How is Agoric orchestrating it, and how is the solution working? Do you want to put more light on that?
Yeah, so I don't see how smart coordination is possible without smart contracts, right? The smart contracts are the composable, reusable, programmable, like insert your thing here, that you can program these smarts into, right? And so the coordination aspect is like, without coordination of anything in any market, you don't have anything. Like, think about Amazon, take away logistics, take away payment gateways, what are you left with, right? So it's how you string it all together. And the hardest part with coordination is it's not sending a transaction from one chain to the other. It's sequencing all the things that need to happen at the right time. And so with orchestrate smart contracts on Agoric, you can do that in the way you need to. The builder picks his own journey, right? You can build in the parameters that address that user's intent. Ideally, if we're talking about like top down, the user is never going to care about what needs to happen for their intent to be delivered. No user wants to know how the sausage is made. They just want to eat their sausage and go home. They don't care about validators. They don't care about bridges. They don't care about any of that. And so at a very simple level, that's what needs to be abstracted away, and it's on the builder picking his tools to decide that and pick that journey.
That's amazing. So this brings me to a question, like we have spoken about different methodology that we are solving the user experience for the end user. So what is the end game for user experience on blockchain? Like, Vivek, you want to go first here?
Sure. So I think the end game is a fully automated blockchain where the user is able to express high-level preferences, and everything else is transparently executed for the user. Right? So, user experience is something that we actually at Okto kind of obsess about. I mean, that's kind of the mission statement with which we actually started off the whole project, with the whole premise that the experience for both the end users as well as for the developers is actually not sorted in the Web3 ecosystem, and that is probably the biggest blocker to mass adoption of the entire product, the ecosystem. While we love the decentralized principles and the whole concept about how people have power in their hand, the trustless ecosystem, we are not never be able to bring the actual value, the true power of it in the hands of the masses unless the experience is sorted for both end users as well as for the developers. So what's the end state? I think end state is fully automated. For example, if you look at sexes, right? Sexes actually solve this in certain ways. Right? For example, if you have to interact with a sex today, it's fairly simple. For example, if I want to swap, or if I want to buy, if I want to sell, it's all single click of button, everything is sorted. But what is not solved there? What's not solved there is decentralization, right? So it has centralization risk, it has centralization problems, and we have seen fairly commonly that the centralization risk actually plays itself out in the ecosystem. And so an end state would be what you would see in the Web 2 world. For example, how I hit the like button in an Instagram, and I don't care about whether a socket protocol sockets are being used, whether it's an HTTP connection, whether JSONs are used. I don't really care about any of that as an end user, right? In similar fashion, in the end state that we have, people will not care about what my liquidity solution is, where my liquidity is lying, what my networks are, what my protocols are. All I'm going to do is I'm going to express high-level intent, give my preferences, and everything else will be automatically sorted while maintaining the principles of decentralization, security, and trustless execution that defines the very principle of the Web3 ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like, if we weren't building or fully decentralized solutions, everything would be easier, right? Like we don't build these things because they're easy. We build them because they're needed.
Because those are very hard to solve problems.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
how do you build a fully decentralized, trustless
Right.
ecosystem and yet give that the experience that you want to build?
Yeah. No, my point is like we're in the blockchain space for a reason. We're not building Web 2 solutions all the time. It's not always as easy as decentralized 100% of the time. So I agree with like kind of what Okto's
Exactly,
trying
and I think we are at one of those curve points, pretty similar to how we didn't know how to send an email over a network, right? I mean, that was a hard to solve problem. But today, that's not a very difficult problem to solve in the Web 2 world. In the Web 3 ecosystem, I think we are at that curve. And I do think that in the next 3 to 5 years, we would have actually solved a lot of problems which will make some of the further building for developers much easier, right? For example, when we say that we want to solve for user experience while also solving for developer experience, the real problems will be solved. People will be able to focus on building their business logics, actually being able to solve and crack for user problems when they don't have to worry about solving the problems of the infrastructure, where they don't have to worry about solving the problems of the platform. And I personally believe that we are at that curve. And as soon as we have crossed that curve is when I think the mass adoption will come in through mass solving of use cases that go beyond, say, for example, financial intents to generic intents.
Yeah, my one-word answer to the question, though, is it should be invisible. The end state of UX in multi-chain world is it's invisible. The user has intent, the user presses a button and signs once, and the user gets their outcome. And whether that's a developer's built that experience or an AI agent who has vibe coded the app for them because it didn't exist and provided that outcome, whatever gets there first, right?
So the end game is chainlessness. So the end game of user experience is chainlessness. Like
Yeah,
you won't
it's
know.
like
No.
pure agnosticism. You don't know where you go to an app, you don't know if it's in Cosmos, if it's in Ethereum, if it's bridging, if it's got to do some complicated validation behind it. You don't know the network security exactly.
That's amazing. So that brings me to my last question. Like that's a pretty interesting one that I want to know. Like, how do you think like narratives like AI fit into Web3?
I have a few ideas. So like I talked about it, like agentic frameworks that utilize AI. I mean, I think we're not far away from, and this is what's interesting about orchestration and building orchestration solutions. There's an opportunity for orchestration builders to create like digestible, composable, reusable components that an AI agent could integrate and deliver that user's intent. So, if we are creating these things in the right way, and if they're maybe if they're lightweight, what's stopping an AI agent delivering that user's intent by using that orchestration and perhaps building the app that sits on top of it? And what's also interesting is with wallets, like maybe wallets just become an interface for an AI agent, and you direct it, you give it its power, you trust it, you say, I want to complete this intent, and users stop interacting with wallets altogether because they trust their AI agent, and it's just an interface for authentication and signing. So.
Sure, pretty much. I think it'll be about improved efficiency and usability. So what an AI agent could actually do is learn on top of all the user behaviors. So for example, you are actually trying to solve for an intent in your various path. An AI agent could actually determine which is the most efficient path and keep optimizing it dynamically, as an example, right? Similarly, on a usability front, for example, if you had a wallet, and if you could give a very high-level intent, and then have the AI agent actually understand what the intent of the intent is, and then do the execution for the intent at the solvers, then you could actually have an AI agent solve for usability too. So I think from a usability and efficiency standpoint, AI agents could actually play a very big role once we have actually solved for the abstraction and coordination, because in absence of abstraction and coordination, even an AI agent would find it very difficult to coordinate across multiple chains.
That's amazing. Thanks a lot, guys, for this session. We learned a lot about user experience today. So happy to host you guys today. Yeah.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.